us on a little bit because of time now. So we're going to be moving on now to our third episode, that is Philip's Koninck's An Extensive Landscape, painted in the 1650s. And since 1999, in the millennium turn, we've had even more collaborations between Southampton and London. And Southampton's conservator Rebecca Moisan and Rachel Billinge, the research associate at the National Gallery, they combined forces to produce X-rays of Philip Koninck's An Extensive Landscape, which is currently on display in Gallery 2, that was shared in an exhibition that you can see here, Take a Closer Look, that was hosted at Southampton in 2000. So Rebecca, why did you ask the National Gallery to X-ray the Philip Koninck's An Extensive Landscape?
Well, prior to becoming SCAG's conservation officer, I worked at the Glenvivian Art Gallery in Swansea, and the Glenvivian have got a painting by Richard Wilson called Solitude, which I had arranged to get X-rayed at the National Museum of Wales, as I thought it exhibited some quite interesting pentimenti, like the pentimenti that Ambrose was talking about earlier of the goldfinch. And it was actually Kate Lowry who Tim has talked about, who did his bursary in the National Gallery with. So it was Kate who actually very kindly X-rayed the painting for me. And as a result of this technical examination, we discovered a completely different composition underneath the top one, which made me rather evangelical about carrying out technical examination on paintings prior to conserving them.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting. And talking about, your interventions on paintings because you wanted to work on the painting, but also show what the public, show the public what you're actually doing in terms of your work. So this painting was a subject of the conservation exhibition, but can you explain a little bit more about, why it was quite so dynamic and how you brought your work, which is normally behind the scenes, in front of the general public?
Well, when I had co-curated a couple of conservation exhibitions at the Glenvivian with my job share partner Jenny Williamson, but Godfrey Worsdale, who was the then SCAG manager, suggested that for this exhibition, Take a Closer Look, that I would remove a strip of discoloured varnish from the painting every week until the treatment was completed. So it wasn't a completely static exhibition, and people could kind of monitor the removal of the varnish as it happened. I think I got married in the middle of doing it, so it must have been a bit of a big gap at some point. It just made a difference.
Wonderful. Well, I also understand that you took cross sections from the painting, which were then analysed by one of your colleagues. Could you explain what was discovered of interest as a result about any of the pigments that you looked at?
Well, I took several minute sort of paint samples from the work of art and embedded them in a resin, which I then ground down so you can expose a literal cross section of the layers on the surface of the painting. And when you read cross sections, you start from the bottom. So you have the ground layer at the bottom, which is applied to a canvas or a panel to allow an artist to paint their composition on it. And then you have a paint layer and a varnish layer, and you may have multiple, obviously, paint or varnish layers, but that's the general composition. And when Killian, who was a lecturer at Cardiff University, examined the paint samples for me, one of the cross sections, which was from Sky, which is the one that's on the cross section that's on the screen at the moment, he found that the paint layer contained crushed blue glass, which is how a blue pigment, which is the coloured component of paint, called smalt, is produced. And smalt was the commonest and cheapest blue pigment in 17th century Holland, but it didn't have very good hiding power. It wasn't very good at covering the layers below it, and often also faded over time. So to overcome this shortcoming, some artists sprinkled rather than painted it on their grounds whilst they were still wet. And this avoided the medium, the oil component, turning yellow and discolouring, which could cause discoloration. And in one of the blue samples, this one here, the concentration of the pigment was so high And there was so little binding medium as well, so little oil, that Cillian thought it was likely that this technique had been used. And the different shades of blue in the Koninck painting have been achieved by mixing the blue pigment with different amounts of lead white in the painting. So what Koninck had actually done, he had sort of used his pigment a little bit like glitter on a sticky surface, in this case the ground, and he just scattered it on a little bit like glitter. And actually, when I was removing the varnish layer from the surface of the painting, and there was no unifying smooth varnish layer over the surface of the painting, the light got refracted quite, you could see the light it was refracted quite a lot because of all these tiny microscopic particles of blue glass on the surface of the painting. And that was quite clear to see with the varnish removed.